The winter berries grew best in shadow, her mother always said, where the sun couldn't quite reach, but the frost hadn't yet claimed. Lyra Ashbourne moved through the twilight forest with practiced ease, filling her basket with the dark fruit that would see Ravenhollow through the coming winter. 17 years she'd walked these woods, 17 winters gathering herbs and berries alongside Seraphine, learning which plants healed and which plants killed. Her mother's hands were gentle, patient, steady. They could set a broken bone or deliver a baby or coax life back into a wolf who'd lost too much blood. Those hands would be broken by dawn. But Lyra didn't know that yet. Not as she hummed an old pack song, her breath misting in the cooling air. Not as she added another handful of berries to her collection, mentally calculating how many jars they would need for preserves. Her mother would smile at her efficiency. Cale would steal them from the pantry when he thought no one was looking. Normal thoughts, peaceful thoughts. The screams shattered them like ice under a hammer. Lyra's basket hit the ground. Berries scattered across the frozen earth like drops of blood, dark and final. She ran before her mind could catch up, with her legs, feet barely touching the ground, as she tore through the underbrush toward home. Ravenhollow sat between two mountains like a child cradled in loving arms. 20 souls called it home. 20 wolves who had chosen peace over power, family over dominance. They had no grand hall, no alpha strutting his authority. They had gardens and laughter and children who learned to shift under summer moons. They had been safe. Past tense. Always past tense now. Lyra burst into the village clearing, and her heart stopped. 3 wolves stood in the center, massive beyond measure, their eyes glowing amber in the firelight. The leader had a torn ear, the flesh ragged and healed wrong, giving his wolf form a lopsided, monstrous quality. His fur was gray, shot through with scars, each one a story of violence, survived and inflicted. To his right stood a wolf of pure black, his coat absorbing light like a void. His eyes were the color of coal left too long in the fire, dead and burning at once. The third was younger, his gray pelt marked with a distinctive white streak from crown to tail. His movements were quick, eager, hungry. And beneath the first wolf's massive paw, pinned to the ground like a butterfly under glass, was Lyra's father. Dorian Ashbourne, hunt leader, protector, the wolf who had taught her to track and fight and survive, lay bleeding in the dirt. His wolf form was smaller, leaner, built for speed and strategy rather than brute force. Against an alpha, he was nothing. "Please," the voice came from beside the fire. Seraphine knelt there in human form, her healer's dress torn, her dark hair falling around her face like a mourner's veil, her green eyes. Lyra's eyes were fixed on the monster standing over her husband. "Take what you want. Just leave us in peace," the alpha with the torn ear laughed. It was not a sound that belonged in the natural world. It was stone grinding against stone bones, breaking under teeth, the death rattle of hope itself. He shifted. The transformation was obscene in its power. Bones cracked and reformed fur, receding to reveal a man 7 feet tall and covered in scars that mapped a lifetime of cruelty. His torn ear remained a jagged hole in the side of his head that leaked shadows. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of mountains. "We don't want your food, little healer." He took a step towards Seraphine. "We want what all conquerors want." Hands grabbed Lyra from behind. She tried to scream, but a palm clamped over her mouth, muffling the sound to nothing. She thrashed, bit down hard, tasted blood. "Stop!" Theron's voice in her ear, cracking with fear. "They'll kill you. They'll kill us all." Her best friend dragged her backward into the shadows, his 17-year-old strength barely enough to contain her fury. Cale was there too, her 12-year-old brother, his face white as bone, his whole body trembling. "The cellar," Theron hissed. "Now!" They pulled her toward the old root cellar, the one their parents had dug years ago for storing winter vegetables. The door was hidden beneath brush and leaves, nearly invisible, unless you knew where to look. Lyra fought every step, her eyes locked on her mother across the clearing. Seraphine's gaze found hers in the chaos, held it for one eternal heartbeat. In that moment, her mother's expression said everything words could not. "Run, live, remember us." Then the cellar door was opening, and Theron was shoving her inside, and Kao was tumbling after, and the world was going dark and wrong and fundamentally broken. The last thing Lyra saw was the second alpha, the one with the black fur, shifting to human form and moving toward Pina the Weaver, whose screams had just begun. Then darkness. Cold earth. Theron's arms around her, holding her still as she tried to claw her way back up. "My mother," Lyra sobbed. "My father. We can't." Theron's voice broke on the words. "There's nothing we can do." Above them, through the wooden slats and packed earth, the screaming started. 7 voices, 7 women who had chosen peace, who had healed wounds and woven cloth and taught children and tended gardens and loved their pack with everything they had. Seraphine the healer, Yara the weaver, Pena the singer, Mirith the wise, Sorel the fierce, Andra the gentle, Win the kind. Their screams lasted until dawn. Lyra pressed her hands over her ears, but the sounds burrowed into her skull anyway, carving trenches through her mind that would never fully heal. Beside her, Kale shook so violently she thought his bones might break. Theron held them both, his face buried against her shoulder, his tears soaking through her dress. Hours passed, or minutes, or years. Time lost all meaning in the dark. When the screaming finally stopped, something worse took its place. Silence. The silence of a world that had ended. The silence of absence. The silence of loss so profound it became its own presence, heavy and suffocating and absolute. Lyra's hands fell away from her ears. Her eyes stared at nothing. Inside her chest, something had frozen solid. Not her heart that still beat stubborn and relentless, but something deeper, something that had once been soft and warm and capable of mercy. That part of her had turned to ice, sharp, cold, unyielding. She would need it for what came next. The cellar door opened to gray dawn light and the smell of death. Kale found them first, stumbling down the steps with blood running from a gash across his chest. He'd hidden elsewhere, survived somehow, and come looking for his sister in the aftermath. "They're gone," he whispered. His voice sounded ancient, worn smooth by horror. "Mother, father, all of them." Lyra climbed the steps slowly. Her legs didn't quite work right. Nothing worked right anymore. The world had tilted on its axis, and she was still waiting for gravity to remember which way was down. The village clearing looked like an abattoir. Bodies lay where they had fallen. Her father's wolf form was sprawled near the fire pit, his throat torn open in a final futile attempt to reach his wife. His front paw was extended toward where Seraphine lay, as if he'd been reaching for her when death claimed him. Seraphine. Lyra knelt beside her mother, and something inside her cracked but didn't break. Not yet. Breaking would come later. For now, there was only observation cataloging the clinical detachment of a healer's daughter, examining the damage. Torn clothes, empty eyes, bruises darkening on pale skin, positioned in the dirt like discarded things, like objects used and thrown away. Lyra's hands moved without conscious thought, closing her mother's eyes, straightening her dress, smoothing back her hair. The same hands that had been taught to heal now performed their final service, restoring dignity where none had been left. Inside the longhouse, she found the others. Yara Theron's mother, her weaver's hands broken. Pena, whose songs had filled summer nights with joy. Mirith, who had lived through 5 wars and thought she'd seen the worst of wolf nature. Sorel, fierce and proud, reduced to this. Andra, gentle soul, brutalized. Win, kind-hearted Win, who had never hurt anyone in her life. 7 women, 7 lives stolen. 7 reasons to hunt. Theron stood in the doorway staring at his mother's body. No tears, no sound, just staring as if looking long enough might rewrite reality. "What are we going to do?" Kale's voice was small, lost the voice of a child who had just learned the world was cruel beyond measure. Lyra stood slowly. She touched the ground where the Alphas had stood, feeling the lingering heat of their violence soaked into the earth itself. When she spoke, her voice was flat, empty, final. "I'm going to kill them. Every single one." Theron looked up from his mother's body. "Lyra, there are Alphas. We're just what?" She turned to face him, and he flinched from what he saw in her eyes. "Just victims. Just the broken remains of a pack number. I won't be that." An old woman emerged from one of the houses that had somehow escaped the destruction. Morwen had lived through 5 wars and 2 famines. Her face was carved with wrinkles deep as ravines, her eyes sharp as winter wind. "Child," she said softly, "revenge is a poison." "Good." Lyra's response came immediate and certain. "Let it consume me. They destroyed my pack. They violated my mother. They murdered my father. I will not let that stand." Morwen studied her for a long moment. Then slowly the old woman nodded. "If you're going to do this, you'll need training, and you'll need to know your enemy. Tell me." "The one with the torn ear is Vargoth the Scarred. He was exiled from King Aldrich's territory 10 winters ago for crimes I won't speak aloud. The black one is Malachar, who followed him into exile. The youngest is Kieran, who joined them later and proved himself the cruelest of all." Morwen's voice hardened. "They've been building an army in the northern wastes. They raid villages because they can, because King Aldrich is too broken to stop them." "The king," Lyra said. "Tell me about him." Aldrich Stormwrath rules from Thornspire 3 weeks' journey east. But don't expect help. His own pack was destroyed years ago by his brother's betrayal. Some say he went mad with grief. Others say he simply gave up. Either way, he does nothing while wolves like Vargath terrorize the borderlands. Lyra looked at the survivors, the few children who had hidden and lived. Kale still bleeding from his chest wound. Theron empty-eyed with grief. Morwen, can you take the children south to safety? The old woman nodded. I can, but what about you? Kale go with them. No. Her brother's voice was firm despite his youth. Mother is dead. Father is dead. I'm not leaving you. You're 12. You're wounded. You go. I'm coming. He met her eyes with a stubbornness he'd inherited from their father. You can't stop me. Theron stood, tearing his gaze from his mother's body. I'm coming too. Don't tell me to stay safe. They killed my mother. If you're hunting them, I'm with you. Lyra looked at her companions, a wounded 12-year-old and a friend who had never raised his hand in violence. This was her hunting party. These were her weapons against monsters. It would have to be enough. We leave at first light, she said. We track them north. We train as we travel. And when we're ready, we strike. And then, Kale asked, and then we bring their fangs to the king. We show him what happens when he abandons his people. That night, they buried their dead. 7 graves in frozen earth. 7 women who deserved so much better than the deaths they received. The children watched in silence as Lyra, Theron, and Kale laid their mothers and aunts and friends to rest. Over her parents' shared grave, Lyra made a promise. I will not rest until every one of them pays. I swear it on your graves. I swear it on the pack. I swear it on everything I am and everything I will become. As the moon rose, she felt her wolf stir inside her. It was angry, wounded, desperate for blood. She let it surface. Let her eyes shift to wolf amber. The transformation rippled through her body, not complete, just enough to feel the predator beneath her skin, waking to purpose. In the moonlight, something glinted near where Vargath had stood. Lyra knelt and picked it up. A single fang, massive and yellowed, torn out during some ancient fight and left behind like a calling card. She held it up to the silver light. This would be the first. By the time she was done, she would have all of them. The first week was brutal in ways that had nothing to do with physical pain. They traveled north through forests that grew darker with each passing mile. The trail Vargath's pack had left was impossible to miss. Broken branches, scattered bones, the ashes of burned villages. The Alphas weren't hiding. They wore their violence like a badge. Every destroyed settlement was a knife to Lyra's heart. Every body they found and buried was another name added to the list of debts owed. But she didn't let herself feel it. Not yet. Feeling would come later after the work was done. For now, there was only the hunt and the training. Each morning before dawn, Lyra woke them to practice. She taught them what Dorian had taught her, balance leverage, finding vulnerable spots on opponents larger and stronger. She made them shift over and over until the transformation became smooth as breathing. She made them run until their legs shook and their lungs burned. Kale was young but determined. His wound healed slowly, leaving a scar he wore like a badge of survival. He practiced with a spear Morwen had given him, his youth giving him speed if not strength. Theron was thoughtful, analytical, always studying their enemies' patterns. He took naturally to the bow, his steady hands and strategic mind making him deadly at distance. And Lyra trained hardest of all. She practiced with knives until her hands bled. She pushed her body past exhaustion and into the place where pain became clarity. Every movement had to be perfect. Every strike had to count. Against Alphas, there would be no second chances. On the 8th day, they found another destroyed village. Recent, maybe 2 days old, bodies still soft in the square. Same as ours, Kale whispered. Lyra examined everything with a healer's eye. The claw marks were massive, unmistakably alpha. Boot prints alongside wolf tracks told her they'd been traveling in both forms. There are more now, Theron said, crouched beside a set of tracks. At least 5 distinct scents. Vargath was gathering followers, building his army one broken wolf at a time. We can't fight an army, Theron continued. No, Lyra agreed. We pick them off, one by one, separate them from the pack. They buried these dead too, though they'd never known them. It felt important, necessary, a way of honoring what Vargath had taken, what he continued to take. 3 days later, they reached the foothills of Iron Peak. The landscape had changed. Jagged rocks thrust up through thin soil like broken bones. Twisted pines grew in defiance of the wind that howled through the passes. The air was thinner here, colder, carrying the scent of snow and something else. Blood, old and new. This was Alpha territory. They moved carefully now, staying downwind using rocks for cover. Lyra could smell Vargas' pack everywhere, scent markers declaring ownership, warning off rivals, announcing to the world that this place belonged to the strong. On their second night in the mountains, they sheltered in a small cave. Lyra took first watch sitting at the entrance and staring at stars that seemed too bright, too indifferent to the suffering below. "You should sleep," Kale said, appearing beside her, his scar pulled tight when he frowned, making him look older than 12. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see them." They sat in silence. Then Kale spoke, his voice very small. "Do you think we can really do this?" Lyra considered lying, considered offering false hope and empty reassurance. But Kale deserved the truth. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I have to try, because if we don't, who will?" The next morning brought their first real opportunity. Theron returned from a scouting run in wolf form, his gray fur standing on end with excitement. He shifted back, breathless. "I found one. Not Vargath or Malakar or Kirin. One of the others, a follower. In Weremol, about 3 miles north, hunting alone. Brown wolf, scarred muzzle. I watched him take down an elk. He's strong, but he's isolated." Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, their chance to draw first blood to prove they could actually do this. "You're sure he's alone?" "Completely. I circled twice. No other scents nearby." They spent 2 hours preparing. Lyra used stones to map out the terrain, planning each step like Dorian had taught her. "Theron, your fastest in wolf form, herd him toward Raven's Gorge." She pointed to a narrow ravine on her improvised map. "Kale, you'll be positioned here with loose rocks. When I give the signal, create a rock slide. Nothing fatal. We need him disoriented, not dead." "And you?" Theron asked. "I'll be at the bottom. When he's down and dazed, I finish it." The plan was simple. That didn't mean it would work. They moved into position as the sun climbed toward noon. Lyra reached the bottom of Raven's Gorge and found her hiding spot, a cluster of boulders that would conceal her until the moment to strike. She shifted. The transformation hurt less, now her body learning the rhythm of change. Bones cracked and reformed. Her senses sharpened, colors bleeding away to leave a world painted in scents and sounds. In this form, she was stronger, faster, more dangerous, but also more vulnerable to primal urges. She took deep breaths, centering herself the way Seraphine had taught. Feel the rage, but don't be consumed by it. Channel it, control it, use it. Above, she heard Theron's signal, a long hunting howl that echoed off the rocks. Then running. Heavy paws on stone, angry snarling. The target had taken the bait. She could see him, now racing down the ravine in full wolf form. Brown fur, scarred muzzle, just like Theron had described. Behind him, Theron's smaller gray form snapped at his heels, driving him forward exactly as planned. The rocks came down, stones crashed around the running wolf, dust erupting in clouds. One caught his shoulder hard enough to make him stumble, his momentum carrying him forward in a tumbling roll. Lyra burst from cover. She hit him at full speed, her smaller mass focused into a single point of impact. He was bigger. All followers were bigger than normal wolves, but she had surprise and fury on her side. She went for his throat. He twisted at the last second, more experienced than she'd expected. His jaws caught her shoulder, tearing through fur and flesh. Pain exploded white-hot through her body. But Lyra didn't let go. This was the first payment on a debt written in her mother's blood. This was justice beginning its long, terrible work. She locked her jaws tighter, finding the vein, feeling his pulse hammer against her tongue. He thrashed, trying to throw her off, but she'd learned from every fight Dorian had ever shown her. She used his size against him, shifting her weight to keep him off balance. His struggles weakened, slowed, stopped. When it was over, when he went still beneath her, Lyra staggered back and shifted to human form. Blood ran from her shoulder in hot streams. Her hands shook. Her whole body trembled with adrenaline and shock. "You did it." Kale's voice was awed. "You killed an alpha follower." "We did it," Lyra corrected. "All of us." Theron was already beside her, examining the wound. "This is deep. You need stitches." Later, first she had work to do. Lyra knelt beside the body and pulled out her knife, the simple hunting blade Dorian had given her years ago. What came next was brutal, necessary, the kind of thing that would haunt her dreams. But she'd made a promise. She extracted the fangs carefully. 4 of them yellowed canines that had torn through flesh and ended lives. Each one a testament to violence survived and inflicted. She placed them in her leather pouch with the one from Ravenhollow. 5 fangs, 19 more to go. Theron stitched her shoulder by firelight, that night his hands steady despite everything. They'd made camp in a defensible position, a small cave with a single entrance that could be guarded. How does it feel? He asked as he tied off the last stitch. Killing. Lyra tested her shoulder, feeling the pull of thread through flesh, like the first step of a very long journey. Are we going to survive this? She looked at him. Her best friend, her brother, in all but blood, who had lost his mother to the same monsters. His hands were shaking. He was trying to hide it, but failing. We might not, she said honestly, but we're going to try anyway. Over the following weeks, they continued their campaign. The second follower fell in an ambush near a frozen stream. Gray-furred, experienced but not experienced enough to expect an attack from a 12-year-old with a spear. Kale's throw was perfect, taking the wolf in the flank and giving Lyra the opening she needed. Cost Theron's 2 fingers torn off when the follower's jaws clamped down in its death throes. 4 more fangs. The third follower was rust-colored and clever. He led them on a chase through treacherous terrain, trying to separate them, pick them off one by one. It nearly worked. Kale's old wound reopened during the pursuit, blood soaking through his shirt. They caught the follower at a cliff edge. Cornered, desperate, he fought like a demon. Lyra took a slash across her ribs. Theron was thrown against rocks hard enough to crack bones. But they won. 4 more fangs. 13 total now. They were no longer children playing at revenge. They had become something harder, something necessary. Each kill taught them new lessons. Alphas relied on size and power, which meant they underestimated smaller opponents. They fought alone, too arrogant to believe they needed help. And they always underestimated a wounded enemy's rage. Lyra learned to use that, to play weak, injured, helpless, right up until the moment she drove her blade home. One evening, sheltering in the ruins of another destroyed village, they saw smoke rising from Iron Peak, black and oily, visible for miles. Something's happening, Theron said. They investigated carefully, staying well back, using their noses and ears more than their eyes. What they found made Lyra's blood run cold. Vargath had gathered his army. At least 20 wolves filled a natural amphitheater of stone, and all of them focused on their leader. The Alpha with the torn ear stood in human form, addressing his followers. Even from a distance, his voice carried weight and menace. If they move as a group, they could destroy everything between here and the coast, Kale whispered. Lyra watched Vargath gesture, saw the other wolves, Malachar and Kieran, flanking him. This was the monster who had killed her father, violated her mother, left a trail of bodies from Raven Hollow to the frozen north. Rage surged through her, hot and demanding. Every instinct screamed to attack now, to throw herself at him, regardless of the odds. But she held back. Her father's lessons echoed in memory. Patience. Strategy. The right moment matters more than the bold moment. We can't fight them all, Theron said. I know. They retreated carefully, making camp miles away where the smoke couldn't reach them. What's the plan? Kale asked. Lyra stared at the 13 fangs spread before her. 3 followers dead, 3 alphas still breathing, an army at their backs. We can't take the army, but we can take the leaders. We wait for them to separate. We find opportunities. We strike fast and fade. And if they don't separate, then we make them separate. She gathered the fangs back into her pouch, feeling their weight. Each one represented a small victory, a step closer to justice. But they needed help, training, resources. They needed someone who understood how to fight alphas and win. The man appeared without warning 3 days later. One moment they were tracking another follower's scent through dense pines. The next, a figure stepped from behind a tree as if he'd been part of the forest itself. Tall, lean, gray-haired despite looking no older than 40. He wore the faded insignia of the King's Guard on his worn leather vest, the wolf head symbol barely visible through years of weather and use. Lyra's hand went to her knife. Easy, the man said, his voice carrying the rasp of someone who'd seen too many winters. I'm not your enemy. Then who are you? My name is Fenwick. I've been watching you for 3 days. Theron tensed. Watching us. You're quite good at hunting alphas, Fenwick continued, as if he hadn't heard the question. 3 followers dead in under a month. Impressive for 3 children with no formal training. We're not children, Lyra said coldly. No. Fenwick's gaze was steady, appraising. I suppose you're not. Not anymore. What do you want? To deliver a message. He took a step closer, hands visible and empty. King Aldrich Stormwrath has heard about your campaign. He wants to meet you. Kale moved to stand beside his sister. The king, the one who's done nothing while villages burned? The very same. Fenwick's expression didn't change. He believes you might be able to do something he cannot. Kill Vargath, Lyra said flatly. Among others. If you come to Thornspire, the king will provide resources, training, Information. Everything you need. What does he want in return? Proof. Fenwick held her gaze. When you kill Vargath and his lieutenants, he wants their fangs brought to his throne. Something cold settled in Lyra's stomach. That's what we were planning anyway. I know. The ghost of a smile touched Fenwick's weathered face. So, will you come? Lyra looked at Kale and Theron. Saw her own exhaustion reflected in their faces. Saw the wounds that hadn't quite healed, the scars that never would. They needed help. They'd killed 3 followers, but 3 alphas remained. Vargath, Malachar, and Kieran were in a different league entirely. Without training, they would die. We'll come, she said, but I have one condition. Name it. When this is over, when I bring him those fangs, the king doesn't get to hide in his tower anymore. He doesn't get to abandon his people while monsters run free. Fenwick studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. He's already made that promise to himself. Your success will simply give him the courage to keep it. The journey to Thornspire took 3 weeks. Fenwick proved an excellent guide, leading them through paths that avoided Vargath's territory while still making good time. As they traveled, he told them stories of King Aldrich's glory days. Aldrich Stormwrath was the greatest AlphaKing in 3 generations, Fenwick said one evening as they made camp. He united the packs, brought peace, established laws that made it possible for wolves like you, wolves who wanted peace, to exist without being crushed by the power-hungry. What happened? Theron asked. Fenwick's expression darkened. His brother, Theon Stormwrath. Aldrich trusted him completely, made him second in command, gave him authority over the king's guard. Betrayal, Lyra said. The worst kind. Theon made a deal with rogue alphas, promised them territory and power if they helped him take the throne. He led them into Thornspire during the festival of the full moon, when the city's defenses were down and everyone was celebrating. The old scout stared into the fire, his eyes seeing things that had happened years ago. They killed Aldrich's mate, his 3 children, most of his pack. Theon himself killed the queen while Aldrich watched, held down by 6 alphas who'd sworn loyalty to the crown just days before. Kale made a small sound of horror. When it was over, Fenwick continued, Aldrich was the only survivor. He killed Theon, killed the 6 who'd held him, killed every traitor he could find. But the damage was done. His family was gone. His trust was shattered. So he gave up, Lyra said. He exiled himself, locked himself in the highest tower of Thornspire, and refused to come down. For 10 years he sat at that window, staring out at a kingdom he can't bring himself to rule. Why does he want to see me? Fenwick looked at her directly. Because you're doing what he couldn't. You're facing your trauma head-on instead of hiding from it. You're fighting back instead of giving up. Maybe he thinks watching you will remind him how. They traveled in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. When they finally crested the last hill and saw Thornspire spread below them, Lyra's breath caught. The city was beautiful. White stone buildings climbed the mountainside in elegant tiers. Towers reached toward the sky like fingers grasping for something just out of reach. The architecture spoke of a time when this place had been filled with life and hope, but it was empty. Perhaps 100 souls moved through streets built for thousands. The buildings were maintained but hollow. The whole city felt like a monument to loss, beautiful and terrible and profoundly sad. It used to sing, Fenwick said quietly. On festival nights, you could hear the mow from miles away. Now it barely whispers. They entered through gates that stood perpetually open. No enemies had dared approach since Aldrich's massacre of the traitors. Guards watched them pass with curious eyes but didn't challenge Fenwick's authority. He led them through winding streets to the central tower. The climb seemed endless stairs spiraling up and up until Lyra's legs burned and her lungs ached. Finally, they reached a massive wooden door. Fenwick knocked once, then pushed it open without waiting for an answer. The room was sparse. A simple bed in one corner, a table covered in maps. Weapons on the walls, swords, spears, bows, all perfectly maintained and never used. And at the window silhouetted against the dying light stood King Aldrich Stormwrath. He didn't turn as they entered, just stood there looking out over his broken kingdom. You're younger than I thought, he said. His voice was deep, carrying the weight of authority, even softened by grief. How many winters? 17, Lyra replied. Does it matter? I suppose not. He turned slowly and Lyra got her first good look at the broken king. 40 winters, perhaps. Tall and broad-shouldered, built like a warrior, even after a decade of inaction. Silver streaked through his dark hair. Scars marked his face, the worst running through his left eye, leaving it milky and blind. But it was his expression that struck her. The haunted look in his good eye. the grief so deep it had become part of his identity, worn like armor that protected nothing. Fenwick tells me you've killed 3 of Vargath's followers, Aldrich said. Show me. Lyra untied her leather pouch and poured the fangs onto his table. 13 of them yellowed and sharp, clattering against wood like bones. The king examined them carefully, touching each one. These are real, he said, something like respect entering his voice. You actually did it. Why wouldn't I? Aldrich looked at her properly, then his one good eye seeing more than she wanted to reveal. They destroyed my pack, Lyra continued. Vargath Malachar and Kieran led an attack on Ravenhollow. They killed the men. They violated 7 women, including my mother. Then they murdered them all. They left the children alive to suffer. Her voice remained steady, empty of emotion. I'm going to kill every single one, and I'm going to bring you their fangs, so you can see what your failure cost. Silence filled the room like water rising in a drowning chamber. Then slowly, Aldrich nodded. You speak plainly. I appreciate that. He set down the fangs. Yes, their blood is on my hands. Every village Vargath destroys is my fault. I could have stopped him years ago. I didn't. I was too broken. And now I can't change the past, but maybe I can help you build a different future. He met her gaze. I'll give you training, weapons, information. Everything I have is yours. And when I succeed, Lyra asked, when I bring you their fangs, then I'll do something I should have done long ago. Aldrich's expression hardened with something that might have been hope. I'll end my exile. I'll take up my responsibilities. I'll make sure no other pack suffers the way yours did, the way mine did. Lyra studied him, saw the guilt eating him alive, saw the desperate need for redemption, for proof that fighting back was possible. She understood that need, felt it in her own bones. Then train us, she said. Make us strong enough to kill legends. For the first time in perhaps years, Aldrich Stormwrath smiled. That, he said, I can do. The first time Aldrich Stormwrath sparred with them, it lasted 43 seconds. Lyra came at him from the left, knife flashing. Theron circled right with his bow drawn. Kale tried to flank with his spear, using the technique they'd developed. Hunting followers surround, distract, strike. It didn't matter. The Broken King moved like water through stone, like inevitability itself. He sidestepped Lyra's blade without seeming to look caught. Theron's arrow mid-flight and disarmed Kale with a twist of his wrist that left the boy sprawling. Then he stood there, barely breathing hard, while all 3 of them lay gasping on the training ground. You fight like prey, Aldrich said. His voice carried no mockery, only observation. You've learned to survive. That's good. Survival kept you alive this long, but survival won't kill Vargath. Lyra pushed herself up, her ribs aching where she'd hit the ground. Then teach us how. That, Aldrich replied, is exactly what I intend to do. Month 1, the training consumed everything. They woke before dawn when frost still painted the windows white. Fenwick would be waiting in the courtyard, his weathered face showing no sympathy for their exhaustion. Again became the most common word in Lyra's vocabulary. She learned to read an opponent's weight shift, the subtle tells that preceded an attack. Learned to use momentum instead of fighting it, to redirect force rather than meet it head-on. Learned that speed and precision could overcome size if applied correctly. The first week left her covered in bruises that bloomed purple and yellow across her skin like grotesque flowers. Her shoulder still healing from the first follower's bite reopened twice. Fenwick stitched it both times without comment, his needle moving with the same practiced efficiency he brought to everything. Theron struggled differently. His mind understood the techniques immediately, but his body needed time to catch up. Fenwick worked with him on distance combat, teaching him to read wind and light, to predict movement, to place an arrow where his target would be rather than where they were. And Kale threw himself into training with a ferocity that worried Lyra. Her 12-year-old brother pushed past exhaustion into something darker. He practiced until his hands bled, until his old wound wept clear fluid, until Fenwick physically stopped him. Rest is part of training, the old scout told him. Dead men can't take revenge. At night, Lyra would find Kale in the armory running through spear drills by candlelight. His face was always set in the same expression, determination hardened to something closer to obsession. She understood, felt the same hunger burning in her own chest, but understanding didn't make it easier to watch. The second week, Aldrich joined their training personally. He didn't go easy on them, didn't coddle or comfort or offer false praise. When Lyra's technique was sloppy, he made her repeat it until her muscles screamed. When Theron's aim wavered, Aldrich stood downrange and dared him to miss. Fear will kill you faster than any alpha, the king said. So will hesitation. If you're going to fight Vargath, you need to know, truly know, that you're capable of killing him. I know, Lyra said, Aldrich's scarred eye fixed on her. Do you killing followers is one thing? They're strong, yes, but they're followers for a reason. They lack the will, the certainty, the absolute conviction that makes an alpha what they are. He stepped closer. Vargath has killed more wolves than you've met in your life. He's survived challenges from alphas twice your size. He's fast, strong, and most importantly, he believes down to his bones that he's invincible. Then I'll prove him wrong. Words, Aldrich said dismissively. Your body needs to believe it before your words mean anything. By the end of the first week, they could last 90 seconds against him. By the end of the second week, 2 minutes. The third week brought a different kind of lesson. Alphas rely on their wolf form, Aldrich explained, gesturing to the weapons lining the armory walls. They believe anything else is beneath them. Honor, tradition, the old ways, all of it designed to keep power in the hands of those born with size and strength. He lifted a short sword, testing its balance. But honor doesn't matter when you're dead, and tradition won't save the wolves Vargath kills next week. Lyra ran her fingers along the weapon racks. Swords, spears, bows, axes, knives of every size and shape. You want us to use weapons. I want you to use everything, your teeth, your claws, your mind, and yes, weapons. Whatever gives you an advantage. He handed her a short blade, the steel catching light, like captured lightning. This is your size, he said. Quick, vicious, close quarters. In wolf form, you're smaller than any alpha. But with this, you can reach the places they can't protect. The knife felt right in her hand, natural, like it had been waiting for her to find it. Theron took to the bow with increasing skill. Fennec taught him to shoot from unstable positions, moving targets, impossible angles. Taught him that the first arrow mattered less than the second, that distraction was sometimes more valuable than a kill shot. Cale discovered an affinity for the spear that surprised everyone, including himself. His youth gave him speed, and the spear's reach compensated for his size. Under Fenwick's guidance, he learned to use it defensively, creating space-controlling distance. The fourth week, they lasted 5 minutes against Aldrich. He smiled afterward, a real smile, not the ghost that usually haunted his features. You're learning, he said, finally starting to think like predators instead of prey. That night, Aldrich called Lyra to his tower alone. She climbed the endless stairs, each step echoing in the stone shaft. The door stood open, firelight spilling into the corridor. Aldrich waited by the window, his usual position silhouetted against the lights of Thornspire below. You wanted to see me, Lyra asked. I wanted to tell you the truth. He didn't turn from the window. About Vargath. Something in his tone made her stomach tighten. 10 years ago, Vargath was my finest warrior, the best I'd ever trained. Aldrich's voice carried the weight of old shame. Fast, strong, intelligent. He could read a fight 3 moves ahead. I trusted him, made him captain of my guard. Lyra's mouth went dry. What happened? My brother happened. Theon found Vargath's weakness, his pride. Promised him power, territory, recognition, beyond what I could offer. Finally, Aldrich turned to face her. When Theon betrayed me, Vargath was one of the 6 who held me down, who made me watch as they killed my mate, my children. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. You trained him, Lyra said slowly. Everything he knows, everything that makes him dangerous, you taught him. Yes, the word came out raw. Every technique he uses to destroy villages, to kill innocents, to spread terror. I put those tools in his hands. Every death he's caused is partially my fault. Lyra understood then why Aldrich had locked himself away, why he needed her to succeed so desperately. This wasn't just about redemption. It was about proving that what he'd created could be destroyed. Is that why you're helping us? She asked. Guilt, partially. Aldrich crossed to a weapons cabinet and opened it. But also because I see in you what Vargath could have been, should have been. Strength in service of protection rather than conquest. He withdrew something wrapped in dark cloth. My father carried this blade. He killed 30 alphas with it over his lifetime. Died peacefully in his sleep at 93 winters, surrounded by grandchildren. Aldrich unwrapped the cloth, revealing a knife that seemed to drink the firelight. Silver, not steel, but true silver forged by methods few still remembered. Alphas heal fast, Aldrich said. Cuts close, broken bones mend, but silver burns. Wounds made by silver take longer to heal, hurt more, weaken faster. He held it out to her. I can't. You can, you will. His scarred eye caught the light. When you drive this into Vargath's throat, I want you to tell him something for me. What? That I'm sorry, Sorry I failed to see what he was becoming. Sorry I didn't stop him before he became a monster. Aldrich's hand didn't waver. But mostly I want you to tell him that the student has one final lesson to learn from the teacher. Lyra took the knife. The silver was cold, heavy with purpose. What lesson? That every monster can be killed. Month 2, the training intensified. Fenwick introduced them to techniques most wolves never learned. How to fight multiple opponents by keeping them clustered, preventing them from using their numbers. How to use terrain, rocks, trees, water as weapons in themselves. How to target the vulnerable points every wolf carried, no matter how large. Behind the ear, he said, tapping Kale's head to demonstrate. Where the skull meets the spine, even a glancing blow here can disorient. A solid strike can kill. The throat is obvious but difficult to reach on a larger opponent. Better to target the legs first. Cripple their mobility, then finish at your leisure. The eyes. Alphas heal fast, but they can't heal what they can't see. Blind them and you control the fight. Lyra absorbed every word, every demonstration. She practiced on dummies stuffed with straw, then on Fenwick himself, carefully always pulling her strikes at the last moment. Theron worked with Aldrich on strategy. The king spread maps across his table showing them Vargath's territory, known strongholds, likely routes of movement. He's gathering power, Aldrich explained. Every village he destroys, he takes the survivors and gives them a choice: join or die. Most join. Fear is a powerful motivator. How many does he have now? Theron asked. My scouts report at least 20 wolves at Iron Peak. Could be more. We can't fight 20. No, Aldrich agreed. But you don't need to fight his army. You need to remove his leadership. Cut off the head, the body falls apart. Kale studied the maps with an intensity beyond his years. What about Malachar and Kieran? If we kill Vargath first, won't they just take over? Possibly. That's why you'll need to kill all 3. Aldrich's finger traced routes on the map. The challenge is getting them separated. Alphas are arrogant, but they're not stupid. They won't face you one-on-one unless forced. Then we force them, Lyra said. The 8th week brought their first real breakthrough. Aldrich sparred with them as usual, but this time they lasted nearly 5 minutes. More importantly, Lyra managed to land a hit, her practice blade touching his ribs in what would have been a killing blow. The king stepped back surprised. Again, he ordered. They fought 3 more times. Twice Lyra found openings. Once Theron's arrow came close enough to ruffle Aldrich's hair. When they finished, all 4 of them were breathing hard. You're ready, Aldrich said. Almost ready. That evening, a messenger arrived with news that drained the warmth from Lyra's triumph. Another village destroyed, on 12 dead. The pattern identical to Ravenhollow. Vargath was still hunting, still killing, still adding to the debt written in blood and grief. Month 3. The final month focused on refinement. They practiced the techniques until they became instinct. Shifted mid-fight, a skill most wolves took years to master. Learned to read each other's movements, to fight as a unit, despite their different styles. Aldrich pushed them harder than ever. Sometimes Lyra wondered if he was trying to break them to test their limits one final time before sending them to face monsters. But she understood the necessity. Against Vargath, there would be no second chances, no room for hesitation or doubt. They had to be perfect or they had to be dead. Those were the only options. On a cold morning near the end of their training, Kale collapsed during practice. One moment he was drilling with his spear movements fluid and precise. The next his legs gave out and he hit the ground hard. Lyra was beside him instantly. Kale, his eyes were open but unfocused. His breath came in shallow gasps. His old wound, Fenwick said, kneeling to examine the scar across Kale's chest. It's infected, has been for weeks probably. He just never said anything. A fury and fear warred in Lyra's chest. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have made me rest. Kale's voice was weak but defiant. And we don't have time for rest. We have time for you to not die, Lyra snapped. They carried him to the healer's wing, a section of Thornspire that saw little use these days. An old woman named Elise cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency, her methods similar to Seraphine's. The similarity hurt. He'll live, Elise pronounced after an hour of work, but he needs 2 weeks of bed rest, minimum. We don't have 2 weeks, Kale protested. Then you'll die, Elise said bluntly. Your choice. Lyra made the choice for him. He rests, we wait. Those 2 weeks tested her patience more than any training. Every day Vargath remained alive was another day he could destroy another village, kill more innocents, add more names to the list of those who deserve justice. But Kale mattered more than her impatience. Family mattered more than revenge. She had to keep reminding herself of that. Aldrich used the delay to share intelligence Fenwick's scouts had gathered. Vargath's movements, patterns, weaknesses, the layout of Iron Peak, the identities of his key followers. There's a young one, Fenwick said, pointing to a sketch. Brennan, 19 winters. His pack was destroyed 6 months ago. Vargath gave him the usual choice. Join or die, Lyra said. Exactly. But Brennan's different. The scouts say he looks reluctant, like he's there because he has no choice, not because he wants to be. Theron leaned forward. Could we use that turn him? Maybe, or he could be bait. Aldrich's expression was cautious. Vargath survived this long by being paranoid. He might be testing our mercy. The possibility lodged in Lyra's mind, a potential ally, or a perfect trap. When Kale was finally cleared to train again, they had just under a week before their supplies would run out, and they'd need to make a decision, stay in Thornspire or return to hunting. Aldrich made the decision for Mim. You're ready, he said on their final day of training. Not perfect. You'll never be perfect, but ready enough to have a chance. He gathered them in his tower that evening, spreading maps across the table. Fenwick's scouts report Vargath has pulled his forces back to Iron Peak. 20 confirmed wolves, possibly more. He knows someone's been killing his followers. He's getting paranoid. Good, Lyra said. Paranoid alphas are dangerous, but they're also predictable. Aldrich's finger traced a route on the map. There's an old law older than any king, older than most packs. The law of single combat. What is it? Theron asked. If an alpha is challenged directly in front of witnesses, they cannot refuse without losing the respect of their followers. It's a matter of pride of dominance. To back down is to admit weakness. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. You want us to challenge him? I want you to challenge all three, Vargath, Malachar, and Kieran. One at a time in single combat. If you win, the army disbands. Ancient law demands it. And if we lose, then you don't, and Vargath's reputation grows even stronger. Aldrich met her gaze steadily. This is the best chance you'll get. Draw them out. Separate them from their numbers. Kill them where their followers can watch. Kale shifted his weight, testing his healed wound. How do we make sure they don't just attack us all at once? You won't, Aldrich admitted. Vargath might ignore the old laws entirely. But if he does, if he shows weakness in front of his own followers, it might fracture his support. Either way, you force his hand. The plan was insane. It was also the only option they had. When do we leave? Lyra asked. Tomorrow at first light. Aldrich straightened his posture, that of a king addressing warriors. You'll travel with Fenwick as far as the borderlands. After that, you're on your own. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony outside her room watching Thornspire's lights flicker like dying stars. In 6 months, this city had become something like home. The first real home since Ravenhollow burned. Footsteps behind her, Aldrich emerged from the shadows, a goblet in each hand. Wine, he offered. I don't drink. Neither do I anymore. But tonight seemed worth breaking the habit. He set both goblets on the balcony rail. I wanted to thank you. For what? We haven't done anything yet. You've done more than you know. Aldrich's scarred face caught the moonlight. For 10 years I've sat in that tower convinced that fighting back was pointless. That monsters like Vargath were inevitable. That the best I could hope for was to hide and wait for death. And now I see a 17-year-old girl who lost everything and chose to fight anyway. Who turned grief into purpose. Who's about to attempt something that should be impossible. He smiled sadly. You've reminded me that giving up is a choice, not a necessity. Lyra looked at him, truly looked at him, saw past the scars and the grief to the king he'd been, the leader he could be again. When I bring you their fangs, she said quietly, you need to keep your promise. Come down from that tower. Lead these people. Make sure what happened to my pack to yours never happens again. I will. The promise carried the weight of an oath. You have my word. They stood in silence, two broken souls, finding something like hope in shared purpose. Finally, Aldrich retrieved one of the wine goblets and raised it. To tomorrow, he said, and to proving that monsters can bleed. Lyra took the other goblet, though she had no intention of drinking. To justice, she replied, and to the 7 who can't fight for themselves. The journey back to Iron Peak took 2 weeks. Fenwick led them through paths they hadn't known existed, routes that avoided Vargath's patrols while still making good time. The old scout said little, but his presence was reassuring. He'd survived decades in the king's service. Knew how to move unseen, how to read the forest, how to stay alive when surrounded by predators. On the 8th day, they encountered Brennan. The young wolf was hunting alone, tracking an elk through dense pines. Theron spotted him first, a flash of russet fur moving through underbrush. They debated for an hour. Could be a trap, Theron argued. Could be an opportunity, Kale countered. Lyra made the decision. We approached carefully, test his reaction. They shifted to wolf form and intercepted him near a frozen stream. Brennan froze when he saw them, his whole body going rigid with fear. Then slowly he shifted to human form. 19, as Fenwick had said, young face marked by old eyes. Scars on his arms that spoke of violence survived. I know who you are, he said. His voice shook. You're the ones killing Vargath's pack. Yes, Lyra replied, shifting back. Are you going to kill me too? The question hung in the cold air. Lyra studied him, saw genuine fear, yes, but also something else. Desperation, hope. That depends, she said. Why are you with them? Because they killed my family. Brennan's hands clenched into fist. Destroyed my village. Vargath gave me a choice: join or watch my little sister die. So I joined. I've been with them for 6 months, and every day I hate myself a little more. You could run, Theron said, to where they'd track me down, kill everyone I love who's still alive. Vargath doesn't forgive desertion. Kale stepped forward, his hand on his spear. How do we know you're telling the truth? You don't. Brennan met his gaze steadily. I could be lying, could be leading you into an ambush, but I'm not. I'm tired of being a monster. Tired of helping them destroy what I used to protect. Lyra felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Trust him and risk everything. Kill him and maybe murder someone who deserved mercy. Her mother's voice echoed in memory. Healing is about knowing when to cut and when to suture, when to cauterize and when to let nature take its course. She made her choice. Go, Lyra said. Run south. Find King Aldrich in Thornspire. Tell him Lyra Ashbourne sent you. He'll give you sanctuary. Brennan's eyes widened. Just like that. Just like that. But if you're lying, if this is a trap, know that I will hunt you down. And what I did to Vargath's followers will seem gentle compared to what I'll do to you. The threat carried weight because it was true. Brennan seemed to understand. Thank you. Truly, He paused, then spoke quickly. Vargath has an old wound, behind his left ear, from a fight years ago. It never healed right. If you can hit it, he'll be disoriented. Then he was gone, shifting to wolf form and running south like salvation itself was chasing him. That was either very smart or very stupid, Theron observed. We'll find out soon enough, Lyra replied. They continued north. 3 days later, they saw the smoke. Iron Peak rose against the gray sky like a broken tooth. The natural amphitheater where Vargath had gathered his forces was clearly visible from their vantage point. There, Fenwick said, pointing, that's where you'll make your stand. They camped that night in sight of their enemy's stronghold. Tomorrow, Lyra would walk into that valley and issue her challenge. Tomorrow, everything would change. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt calm, centered, ready. This was what she'd been training for, what she'd been building toward since the moment she'd pulled that first fang from the dirt at Ravenhollow. Do you think Brennan was telling the truth? Kale asked as they huddled around a small fire. About the wound, maybe. About wanting sanctuary, I think so. Lyra stared into the flames. But it doesn't matter. Tomorrow happens regardless. Theron checked his arrows for the 100th time. If it goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then we die fighting instead of living afraid. Lyra looked at her companions, her brother, her best friend, the family she had left. No regrets. No matter what happens tomorrow. No regrets, they echoed. Fenwick spoke from the shadows. I'll be watching from the ridge. If you need an exit, I'll provide covering fire. We won't need it, Lyra said with more confidence than she felt. The old scout smiled. That's what every warrior says before a battle. The smart ones prepare an escape route anyway. Morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. Lyra woke before dawn, her body knowing what her mind refused to acknowledge. This could be her last sunrise. She checked her weapons. The silver knife Aldrich had given her. Her father's hunting blade. The practiced short sword she'd claimed from Thornspire's armory. Kale was already awake, running through spear drills with mechanical precision. Theron sat fletching arrows, his hands steady. They'd said everything that needed saying. Now there was only the doing. When the sun finally crested the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold, Lyra stood. It's time. They shifted to wolf form and descended into the valley. Iron Peak's amphitheater was natural formation rocks worn smooth by wind and time, creating a bowl that could hold hundreds. Today it held Vargath's army of 20, and all eyes turning as 3 small wolves entered their territory. At the center stood the Alphas. Vargath, massive and scarred, his torn ear marking him instantly. Malakar black as midnight, his eyes burning with cold intelligence. Kieran younger and eager, his white streak brilliant against gray fur. They watched the intruders approach with expressions that ranged from amusement to anticipation. Lyra shifted to human form. Beside her, Kale and Theron did the same. She raised her voice, letting it carry across stone. Vargath the Scarred, I am Lyra Ashbourne of Ravenhollow. You murdered my pack. You violated my mother Seraphine and 6 other women. You left their bodies in the dirt like garbage. The amphitheater went silent. I challenge you to face me, unless you're a coward who only fights the helpless. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Vargath's laugh rolled across the valley like thunder. He shifted to human form, 7 feet of scars and muscle, and absolute confidence. You're the little wolf who's been killing my pack, he said, his voice like grinding stone. I'm impressed. Most survivors just hide and weep. Do you remember Ravenhollow? Lyra asked. Barely. We've hit so many villages, they all blur together. He tilted his head, pretending to think. Was that the one with the healer who kept praying that was funny? The words should have broken her, should have sent her into a blind rage that would get her killed. But Aldrich had trained her too well. She felt the rage, acknowledged it, used it to fuel her focus rather than destroy it. Her name was Seraphine, Lyra said coldly. My mother. You violated her. You murdered her. You left her body where my father tried to reach her with his dying breath. Vargath's smile widened. Oh, I remember now. She was the pretty one. Fought back harder than the others. Had spirit. He laughed again. She died hard. They all did. Beside her, Kale made a sound like a wounded animal. But Lyra remained still. Centered. Ice cold. I'm going to kill you, she said quietly. You, Malakar, and Kieran. All 3, today. The amphitheater erupted in laughter. 20 wolves howling at the absurdity of a 17-year-old girl challenging 3 alphas. When the noise died down, Vargath spread his arms. You, child, you're going to kill me. You're brave, I'll give you that. Brave and stupid. Then let's make it interesting. Lyra raised her voice so all could hear. You claim to be strong. Prove it. Fight me one-on-one. All 3 of you one at a time. If I lose, you kill us all. But if I win, if I kill all 3 of you, your pack disbands. Malakar shifted to human form, tall and lean. Why would we agree to that? Because if you don't, you're admitting you're afraid. You're admitting that 3 of the strongest alphas in the north need their entire pack to fight one 17-year-old girl. She let the words sink in. How long will your followers respect you after that? She saw it the moment Vargath's expression shifted from amusement to anger. Saw him recognize the doubt in his followers' eyes. Pride. The one weakness Aldrich had promised she could exploit. Fine, Vargath growled. We'll play your game. Kieran goes first. The youngest alpha stepped forward, shifting to wolf form. Gray fur with that distinctive white streak. His eyes were eager, hungry, already tasting victory. Lyra looked at Kale and Theron. Whatever happens, don't interfere. This is my fight. Lyra, Kale started. Promise me. Reluctantly, they nodded. She turned back to face Kieran, who was already moving into position. Drew the silver knife, felt its weight settle into her palm like it belonged there. Around them, Vargath's pack formed a circle. A fighting ring with no escape. This was it. The moment everything came down to. 6 months of grief and training and hunting all building to this single fight. Lyra shifted. The transformation was smooth now, effortless. She felt her bones crack and reform, felt fur sprout and senses sharpen. In wolf form, she was smaller than Kieran, smaller than any alpha. But size wasn't everything. Aldrich had taught her that. Her mother had taught her that, and now she would prove it. Kieran charged, and the killing began. Kieran came at her like a storm given flesh. His white-streaked form blurred across the amphitheater, claws tearing up frozen earth. He was faster than the followers she'd killed. Fast enough that most opponents would have been dead before they realized the fight had started. But Lyra had trained with Aldrich's Stormwrath. She sidestepped at the last possible moment, using the technique Fenwick had drilled into her until it became instinct. Kieran's momentum carried him past, and as he did, she lashed out with claws extended. 4 red lines opened across his flank. First blood. Kieran spun, surprise flashing in his amber eyes. He'd expected an easy kill, expected a child playing at warrior. He was learning differently. They circled each other. The watching wolves had gone silent, 20 predators holding their breath as impossible met inevitable. Kieran feinted left, then dove right, jaws snapping for her throat. Lyra dropped low, felt his teeth close on air, where her neck had been a heartbeat before. She drove upward, using her smaller size to slip beneath his guard. Her jaws found his front leg. Bone crunched. Kieran howled and stumbled, his weight shifting wrong. Blood ran hot and copper sweet across her tongue. She should have pressed the advantage, should have gone for the killing blow while he was off balance. But something made her hesitate. Kieran shifted to human form, one arm hanging useless. Blood ran from the wounds she'd inflicted. His young face was twisted with pain and something else. Fear. "Wait," he gasped. Lyra shifted as well, staying low, ready to move. Around them, Vargath's pack stirred with confusion. "Wait," Kieran repeated. "Please, Vargath killed my family too. He forced me to join. Told me he'd hunt down my sister if I refused." The words hit like physical blows. "You were at Raven Hollow," Lyra said, her voice flat. "I saw you. You participated." "I know." Tears cut tracks through the dirt on his face. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself. But please, I can help you. Malachar always favors his left side in combat. His right eye is weaker. And Vargath? I already know about Vargath's wound." Lyra's hand moved to the silver knife at her belt. "Brennan told me." Something shifted in Kieran's expression. Relief, perhaps, or hope. "Then you understand. Some of us don't want this. Some of us are trapped." Lyra looked at him, really looked, saw a young wolf not much older than herself, broken by impossible choices, saw the same grief she carried reflected in different eyes, mercy or justice. Aldrich's voice in her memory. "Sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they're not. You'll have to decide which matters more." She made her decision. "If you truly want out," she said quietly, "then choose, right here, right now. You can walk away, find sanctuary with King Aldrich, or you can keep serving monsters. If I walk away, Vargath will kill me. Then die free instead of living as his weapon." Lyra's hand tightened on the knife. "Choose quickly." Kieran looked past her to where Vargath stood, watching his scarred face unreadable. Then back to Lyra. "Make it quick," he whispered. "Please." Una understanding hit her like cold water. He wasn't asking for mercy. He was asking for an end. "Close your eyes," Lyra said softly. Kieran did. In that moment, he looked even younger. A boy forced to become a monster, finding his only peace in death. She shifted and moved in one fluid motion. Her jaws found his throat, not the killing terror of rage, but the precise strike of mercy. Quick, clean, final. Kieran's body went limp in her grip. When Lyra released him and stepped back, shifting to human form, the amphitheater was absolutely silent. She knelt beside Kieran's corpse and pulled out her father's hunting knife. The work was brutal, necessary. 4 fangs extracted with shaking hands. She placed them in her pouch, feeling the weight increase. 17 fangs total now, 7 more to go. When she stood, she found Vargath's pack looking at her differently. Not with mockery anymore, with something closer to fear and respect. "Who's next?" she asked. Malachar the Black moved like shadow-given substance. Where Kieran had been all speed and fury, Malachar was patience itself. He circled slowly in wolf form, his black fur absorbing light, making him difficult to track against the dark rocks. Testing her, studying her, looking for weaknesses. Lyra shifted and circled opposite, keeping her movements small and controlled. She couldn't afford to waste energy. The fight with Kieran had open wounds, nothing serious but enough to slow her down if she wasn't careful. Blood ran warm down her shoulder where Kieran's claws had caught her arm. Malachar saw it. His eyes tracked the wound like a hunter marking prey. He lunged without warning. Not the wild charge of youth, but the calculated strike of experience. He came in low, targeting her injured shoulder, trying to disable rather than kill immediately. Lyra twisted, felt his teeth scrape fur, but not catch flesh. She used his momentum, letting him pass close enough to rake claws across his face. One eye. She aimed for one eye. Her claws found their mark. Malachar jerked back with a snarl, blood running from 3 furrows that had barely missed blinding him. They reset, circled again. This time Malachar was more cautious, more patient. He knew she was dangerous now. Knew that underestimating her meant death. Minutes passed, neither willing to commit fully, both looking for the perfect opening. Then Lyra saw it, a slight favoring of his left side, just like Kieran had said. His right eye watered from the wound she'd inflicted, affecting his vision. She filed the information away and waited. Malachar attacked again, faster this time. A faint high, then dropping low. Classic misdirection that would have worked on most opponents. But Lyra had sparred with Aldrich. had learned to read the subtle weight shifts that preceded movement. She saw the real attack coming. Mid-dodge, she shifted to human form. The transformation was instantaneous, a technique Aldrich had drilled into them until their bodies remembered it better than breathing. Smaller, faster, suddenly occupying a space where a wolf couldn't fit. Malakar's jaws closed on empty air. Lyra came up behind him, already shifting back the silver knife in her hand. She drove it into the base of his skull. Silver burned through bone and brain and life itself. Malakar's massive body seized, then went limp. He was dead before he hit the ground. The watching pack flinched back as one organism. They'd just watched a 17-year-old girl kill their second strongest alpha using a weapon most wolves scorned as beneath them. Lyra shifted back to human, breathing hard. Her shoulder screamed. Her ribs ached where Malakar had gotten one good hit in during that final exchange. But she was alive, and he was dead. She extracted his fangs with clinical precision. 4 more yellowed canines added to her growing collection. 21 fangs, 3 to go. When she looked up, she met Vargath's eyes across the amphitheater. The scarred alpha stood in human form now, his massive frame radiating controlled violence. His torn ear leaked shadow in the afternoon light. He was smiling. "Impressive," Vargath said. His voice carried across the silence like grinding stone. "You actually did it. Killed 2 of my lieutenants." He started walking toward her, each step deliberate. "You know what I'm going to do to you now?" "You're going to try to kill me," Lyra replied, "and you're going to fail." Bold words from a bleeding child. Vargath stopped at the edge of the fighting circle. "Let me tell you what's really going to happen. I'm going to break every bone in your body, slowly. One at a time. I'm going to make you beg for death the way your mother begged." The mention of Seraphine should have shattered her control. Instead, it solidified it. "My mother's name," Lyra said very quietly, "in your mouth is your last mistake." She shifted, and Vargath came for her like vengeance itself. If Kieran had been a storm and Malakar's shadow, then Vargath was an avalanche. Massive, overwhelming, unstoppable. His first strike caught her full force, sending her tumbling across frozen ground. Ribs cracked. The air left her lungs in an explosive gasp. She rolled to her feet, somehow instinct overriding pain. His second attack followed immediately, jaws snapping for her throat, claws raking for her belly. She barely avoided both. Felt teeth tear through the fur on her neck. Felt claws open her flank like tearing paper. This was different. This was fighting a legend. Fighting the wolf who had destroyed her pack, who had trained under Aldrich Stormwrath, himself who had survived a decade of challenges from alphas twice her size. Lyra retreated, trying to gain space to think. Vargath pressed the advantage, giving her nothing. No time to plan, no time to breathe, only the constant assault of teeth and claws and crushing weight. She was losing, bleeding from a dozen wounds, running out of room to retreat, out of options, out of time. Vargath's laugh was a physical thing. "Is this it? Is this all the great hunter has to offer?" He caught her with a massive paw, pinned her against rock. His weight was impossible. Bones creaked in her chest. "Your mother made the same sounds," he whispered. "That little whimper when she realized she was going to die. That's the sound I've been waiting to hear from you." Lyra's vision was going gray at the edges. Her lungs burned. Her ribs were breaking under the pressure. She was going to die here, just like her mother, just like all 7 women who couldn't fight back. No, the word came from somewhere deep, some core of herself that refused to accept defeat. No, she'd made a promise over 7 graves. She'd sworn to her mother, her father, her pack. She'd looked Aldrich in the eye and promised to prove that monsters could bleed. No. Lyra's jaw found the old wound behind Vargath's left ear, the one Brennan had mentioned, the one that had never healed right. She bit down with everything she had left. Vargath's howl shook the amphitheater. His weight shifted the pressure, releasing as pain overrode his control. Lyra dropped, rolled, came up, moving. Shifted to human form mid-movement, the silver knife appearing in her hand like magic. Vargath was shaking his head, trying to clear the disorientation from the wound she'd reopened. Blood ran down his neck. She had seconds, maybe less. Lyra shifted back and went for his throat. Not with careful precision this time. Not with mercy or restraint or anything except pure, focused rage. This was for Seraphine, for Dorian, for 7 women who deserved so much better. Her jaws locked on his throat, and she held on through everything that came next. Vargath thrashed. His claws raked her back, opening wounds that should have killed her, should have severed her spine, torn out her lungs, ended her life in seconds. But she didn't let go, couldn't let go, wouldn't let go. She tasted his blood, felt his pulse hammer against her tongue, each beat weaker than the last, felt him struggle and fight and slowly terribly die. When Vargath finally went still, when his struggles ceased and his heart gave one final beat, before silence, Lyra held on for 10 more seconds, making sure, making absolutely certain that the monster who had destroyed her world was truly finally dead. Then she released him and staggered back, shifting to human form. Her legs didn't want to hold her. She caught herself against a boulder, vision swimming. Blood ran from the wounds too numerous to count. Her back was on fire. Her ribs screamed with every breath. But she was alive, and Vargath was dead. Monsters bleed, she thought distantly, just like everyone else. The amphitheater was silent. 20 wolves stood frozen, staring at the impossible made real. Their leader, the great Vargath, the scarred destroyer of Pax terror of the borderlands, lay dead at a girl's feet. "It's over," Lyra said. Her voice came out rough, damaged. "Your leaders are dead. The pack is dissolved. Go back to your territories. Live peacefully." She pulled herself upright through sheer will, or face the king's justice. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then slowly, wolves began to leave. Some shifted to human form and walked away. Others melted into the mountains as if they'd never been. Within minutes, the amphitheater was empty, except for Lyra, 3 corpses and 2 figures running toward her from the rocks. Kale and Theron caught her as her legs finally gave out. "You did it," Kale breathed. "Lyra, you actually..." "Not done yet." She pushed away from them, forced herself to kneel beside Vargath's massive body. The extraction was brutal. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the knife. Blood made everything slippery. Pain kept trying to drag her down into darkness. But she finished. 4 fangs from Vargath, 4 from Malakar, 4 from Kieran. She pulled out her leather pouch and added them to the collection. The weight was substantial now, heavy with bone and memory and justice, finally delivered. 24 fangs total, 7 alphas, dead. 1 promise kept. She held the pouch up to the dying light, watching blood drip from the seams. "This is for you, Mother," she whispered. "For all 7 of you. I told you I'd make them pay." Then the darkness she'd been fighting finally claimed her. Lyra woke 3 days later in a bed she didn't recognize. Her body was wrapped in bandages. Every breath hurt. Every movement sparked new pain in muscles she hadn't known existed. But she was alive. "Welcome back," Fenwick said from a chair beside the bed. "You've been out for 72 hours. We weren't sure you'd wake up." "The fangs..." "Safe, I have them." He held up the leather pouch. 24, just like you said. 4 from each of the 3 followers you killed before training. 4 each from Kieran, Malakar, and Vargath. Lyra let her head fall back against the pillow. "How bad?" "Your back is shredded. 16 deep lacerations, any one of which could have killed you. 3 cracked ribs. Severe blood loss. You should be dead." Fenwick's weathered face creased with something that might have been a smile. "But you're too stubborn for that." "Where are Kale and Theron?" "Hunting. We're still 3 weeks from Thornspire and we need food. They'll be back by evening." 3 weeks. 3 more weeks until she could deliver the fangs to Aldrich and fulfill her promise. It felt like both forever and not nearly enough time. The journey back was slow, painful, and strangely peaceful. They traveled in silence, mostly each lost in their own thoughts. Lyra's wounds healed with the supernatural speed of wolfkind, but not fast enough to prevent scars. She would carry Vargath's last attack on her back for the rest of her life. She found she didn't mind. Some things deserved to be remembered. On the 15th day, they saw Thornspire's white towers on the horizon. The sight brought tears to Lyra's eyes for reasons she couldn't quite name. Relief, exhaustion, the knowledge that the hunt was finally over. They entered the city to stares and whispers. Word had spread somehow. The servants, the guards, the few citizens, all of them watched the 3 bloodied travelers pass with wide eyes. Fenwick led them straight to the central tower. The climb was agony. Each step pulled at healing wounds. By the time they reached Aldrich's door, Lyra was shaking with exhaustion. But she refused help. This she would do on her own. The door stood open. Firelight spilled into the corridor. Aldrich waited by his table, not at the window this time, but standing ready as if he'd been expecting them. "You're back," he said. Lyra crossed to the table and pulled out the leather pouch. 24 fangs spilled across the wood like bones cast for divination. Vargath, Malakar, Kieran, and the 4 followers who had started this hunt. Aldrich picked up one of Vargath's fangs, examining it carefully. His hand trembled slightly. "You did it," he said softly. "You actually killed him. All of them, like I promised. Show me your back." Lyra turned and lifted her shirt. She heard his sharp intake of breath as he saw the scar's 16 parallel lines carved through skin and muscle barely healed. These should have killed you. They would have, if I'd let them. Aldrich's hand touched her shoulder gently. You can rest now. The hunt is over. Not quite. Lyra turned back to face him. You made me a promise too. Remember, when I brought you these fangs, you would end your exile. For a long moment, Aldrich stared at the fangs scattered across his table. Then he looked at her, really looked, seeing past the wounds and exhaustion to the determination beneath. You're right. He took a deep breath. Tomorrow I descend from this tower. Tomorrow I call the scattered packs together. Tomorrow I start rebuilding. Movement in the corner of her vision. Lyra turned just as a figure lunged from behind the door, blade raised, eyes wild with fanatic devotion. For Theon, the assassin screamed. Time slowed. Lyra's hand moved on instinct, pulling the silver knife from her belt. Her arm snapped forward in the throw Fenwick had taught her. The blade caught the assassin mid-leap, punching through his throat. He crashed to the ground, gurgling, dying. Silence. Aldrich stared at the body, then at Lyra. You just saved my life. Now we're even. She retrieved her knife, cleaned it on the dead man's clothes. You gave me the tools for revenge. I gave you a reason to live. The king's laugh was startled, genuine. I suppose we are. The great gathering happened 3 days later. Word spread fast through supernatural channels. King Aldrich Stormwrath was emerging from exile. The broken king was whole again. The scattered packs needed to hear what he had to say. Hundreds assembled in Thornspire's grand courtyard. More wolves than Lyra had ever seen in one place. They filled the white stone plaza, a sea of faces waiting to hear what their king would say. Aldrich stood on a raised platform wearing his ceremonial armor for the first time in a decade. Beside him stood Lyra, Kale, and Theron, bloodied, scarred proof that fighting back was possible. When Aldrich spoke, his voice carried across the assembled crowd with the weight of absolute authority. I called you here to witness a new beginning. For too long I have failed you. I allowed my grief to blind me to your suffering. I sat in my tower while villages burned, while packs were destroyed, while innocent lives were taken. He paused, letting the words sink in. That ends today. Aldrich gestured to Lyra. This is Lyra Ashbourne of Ravenhollow. Many of you have heard the stories. Some dismiss them as exaggerations. I'm here to tell you that every word is true. He picked up Vargath's fangs from a velvet cushion, holding them high for all to see. Lyra lost her pack to Vargath's violence. Her mother, Seraphine the healer, along with 6 other women. Yara the weaver, Pina, the singer, Mirith, the wise Sorel, the fierce Andra, the gentle, and Wyn the kind, were raped and murdered. The crowd's murmur was like distant thunder. Her father, Dorian, died defending them. The children who survived were left with nothing but grief and fear. Aldrich's voice hardened. Lyra could have hidden, could have fled to safety. Instead, she did what I could not. She hunted the alphas who destroyed her pack. She killed 7 of them, including Vargath himself. And she brought me their fangs as proof that justice is possible, that monsters can be defeated, that we are not helpless. He held the fangs higher. These represent more than revenge. They represent a promise that I will no longer stand idle while my people suffer. A promise that any attack on a pack, any violation of the innocent, will be met with swift and absolute justice. Aldrich drew his sword, the blade catching sunlight like captured fire. I hereby establish new laws for all territories. Those who prey on the weak will face the king's justice. The age of fear is over. The age of safety begins now. The crowd erupted. Cheers and howls mixed into a sound like hope given voice. 1 year later, they unveiled the monument. It stood in the center of Thornspire, visible from every approach to the city. A massive sculpture carved from white stone, 7 wolves standing together, defiant and strong. Beneath each figure, a name was engraved: Seraphine the healer, Yara the weaver, Pina the singer, Mirith the wise, Sorel the fierce, Andra the gentle, Wyn the kind. And beneath all of them, words Lyra had written herself. They were violated. They were murdered, but never forgotten. Their memory became the sword that severed tyranny. Their names became the foundation of justice. They were pack. They will always be remembered. Hundreds attended the unveiling. Wolves from every territory come to pay respects to women they'd never known, but whose deaths had changed everything. Lyra became Aldrich's ranger, protecting the borderlands. Kale joined the King's Guard. Theron became a diplomat. Brennan the wolf she'd shown mercy became one of Aldrich's most trusted scouts. The years passed, peace held, the monument stood eternal. 23 years later, Aldrich called for Lyra one final time. She found him in his bed, diminished but clear-eyed. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved me. Not just my life, you saved what was left of my soul." "You saved me too," Lyra replied, holding his hand. They sat in silence until his breathing stilled. Aldrich Stormwrath died peacefully. They buried him beside the monument. Aldrich Stormwrath, king, protector, redeemed. More years passed. Lyra grew old, gray hair, faded scars, grandchildren. At 83, she returned to Thornspire one final time. The city thrived now. Families filled streets once empty. Children played safely. Peace endured. She sat at the monument's base, touching her mother's stone face. "Hello, Mother. Long life. Good life. I kept my promise." Spring sun warmed her face. Around her, Thornspire lived. "I'm tired now. Time to rest. Time to join you." Left the children alive to suffer. Was she scared? Terrified. But she fought anyway. That's what bravery is. They lit candles together as twilight fell. 7 names carved in stone. 24 fangs behind glass. One story passed down through generations. And a lesson that would never die: monsters can bleed. Justice matters. And love, the fierce protective love of a daughter for her mother, of a warrior, for her people of the broken, for the chance to become whole, endures forever.